This is an SOS distress call from the mining ship Red Dwarf. The crew is dead, killed by a radiation leak. Luckily, video records of the survivors' attempts to return to Earth still exist. These blokes, Brent and Paul, are ready to tell you all about them. You're listening to TongueTied, a Red Dwarf podcast. Stand by for comment and analysis on your favorite episodes of Red Dwarf.
Good, Benny.
Featuring
Boys from the Dwarf,
Brent Johnson.
Hey, smaghead.
And Paul Towsley.
Better make myself look big.
And now, from the drive room, the boys from the Dwarf.
Look out there! The slime's coming home!
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the very first episode of TongueTied, a Red Dwarf podcast. I'm Brent Johnson, host of Doctor Who, The Quest is the Quest, and I'll be co-hosting this show alongside my good friend, Paul Towsley.
Hey,
Paul.
there. Hi there. How's it going, Brent?
Good.
Well, I came from Rochester, New York, and on the internet, I can be found at paultowsley.com. And I guess my whole history of podcasting is that I didn't really know about podcasting right at the beginning, but then my favorite radio show got moved off of radio and went into limbo and then came back as a podcast. And that's the Mike O'Mara Show, which was preceded by the ever more popular Don and Mike Show. And I realized that there was this medium out there where there were no rules anymore. And we can just kind of come on and open up the mic and we can have whatever kind of radio show about whatever damn thing we want to talk about. And here we are.
Cool.
Yeah, so I decided to do the Paul Towsley Show, which was pretty much just anything I wanted to talk about. And a lot of that has to do with local music here in the Rochester area. And my love of Doctor Who also had me create the Towsley TARDIS podcast.
And a little about me, I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I've been a Doctor Who fan forever. And I wanted to do something a little special for the 50th anniversary, my own little contribution, since everybody else was doing something. And I came up with the idea to watch every single episode, even the ones that are missing in the reconstructed format. Every single episode, and try to squeeze them all into 1 year and do a podcast like almost every week.
You're far too humble, my friend, because you think it's your own little contribution. Watching all of those episodes in 1 year, and actually less than a year, is downright Herculean. I don't know how you did it.
It was 10 months. So it was actually less than a year. And it was around the end of January, and I finished up like the day before. I put out the last episode the day before the anniversary. So,
and where did you discover the medium of podcasting?
Before I got married, I used to live in an apartment and just mess around on the internet one day, and I heard something about something called a podcast. I was like, "What is this?" And it's like I found out it was basically a radio show on the internet for free with no commercials, just people talking about whatever they want to talk about. So naturally, the first thing I type in is Doctor Who. And I came up with Podshot with Ken Deep and Louis Trapani. And I saw it, and it was like an hour and a half. And I was like, whoa, these people talk about Doctor Who for an hour and a half? This is awesome. So I got into it there. And shortly after, I got into Radio Free Skaro and just been listening to different podcasts for like 5 years or so.
And it's fun, isn't it, to go and search for these different podcasts and take a little listen to one, and if you don't like it, you can move on to something else that you might like.
That's right.
And then all of the interconnectivity between them. I started listening to Doctor Who podcasts, and I found the TARDIS Tavern because of my love of drinking beer. And in listening to TARDIS Tavern, I heard a promo for David Huey's podcast, Who on Who. And I totally fell in love with that. So that kind of made me realize that, oh, wait, people are actually listening to this stuff. People would actually want to listen to possibly listen to the things that I want to say about Doctor Who also. So I said, what the heck? I can do it.
Well, on this show, we did. You were on my show last year, and I was on yours for an episode, and so we decided to get together and talk about Red Dwarf, which is one of my favorite sitcoms ever.
Let me open up a little bit more about that, too, because before that, you had actually talked about a show on Quest is a Quest called Luther, which was written by a guy that wrote for Doctor Who. And I gave it a try. And I was like, oh, wow, this is an awesome show. That Brent guy has got good taste. And then later you started talking about Red Dwarf, and I was like, maybe he wants to talk about Red Dwarf too.
Yeah, I'm glad you picked up on Luther. That's an awesome series.
Absolutely. Is there more coming? Do you know, or is it over?
I believe there is another series coming.
Okay, because I haven't seen Series 3 yet. It hasn't hit Netflix as far as I know, but I should track that down.
It's pretty good. It's short again. It's only 4 episodes, and it's better than series. I mean, I like Series 2, but to me it was a little better. Still not as good as Series 1.
Yes, Series 1 really knocked it out of the park, man. That was really incredible.
So we decided to talk about Red Dwarf. So today we're going to be looking at Series 1 of Red Dwarf, which ran from February 15th to March 21st, 1988. And the stories in this season are The End, Future Echoes, Balance of Power, Waiting for God, Confidence and Paranoia, and Me Squared. Or Me Too, depending on who you are. Paul, how did you get into Red Dwarf?
Back in the late 90s, I was hanging out with my best friend Dylan Jennings, who I hope to have on the show in the future, and he popped in a little episode of a comedy sci-fi sitcom called Red Dwarf, and the episode happened to be backwards. And that's how I got into it, because I thought that it was very creative and different, but not too deep either. You know, it's just fun. That's how I got into it. I'll have to ask you the same question. Brent, how did you get into Red Dwarf?
Well, PBS used to show, they used to show Doctor Who during the week. Was every night, like 6 or 6:30 on PBS, Monday through Friday. Well, then they moved it to Saturday nights. And one Saturday I was watching, and as it was going off, it showed, this new show coming on called Red Dwarf. I was like, what is that, And I watched it, and it was the episode called Marooned, where Rimmer and Lister are stranded on a planet. I think that's Series 3, isn't it?
It is. It's actually the episode right after the one that I watched.
Yeah. And I loved it. It was so funny. And again, it's the original concepts that really make me love this show, because after I saw this, I got into it, and I was like, okay, so I go to the video store, like the local Suncoast. I'm looking around, and I find it, and I see Series 1. I was like, okay, I'm going to try this out. So it's a videotape, it wasn't on DVD yet. So I get the videotape, I watch them, and I'm like, wow, these shows are like so original. And it got to the point where I didn't even read the back of the box. I didn't want to know what they were about. I just wanted to watch it because the concepts were so original. I wanted to kind of be surprised about what was going to happen. So I still do that.
One of the bonuses of Marooned also was that it was really focusing on the Lister-Rimmer relationship also, and we're going to be digging deep into that for Series 1 and 2, because that's really the foundation of Series 1 and 2. After that, Crichton and the cat really become more main characters also. So that's cool. I have not seen Series 10 yet. I don't know if you've seen the whole entirety of the Red Dwarf.
I have.
Series.
I've not seen 10 either. I have it ready to watch. I saw the titles of the episodes, and I saw the last one was called The Beginning. And then that kind of scared me. I was like, oh no, is this really the last season of Red Dwarf? Just because the first one was called The End, the last one's called The Beginning,
I would say so.
So then part of me was like, okay, I really want to see this. But then if I watch it, then there's no more Red Dwarf ever. So just silly little me. I've been putting it off, but I think I'm going to watch it here pretty soon.
So as long as our listeners don't spoil Series 10 for us, maybe we can save it and wait until October or whatever to actually watch it. No, you don't want to do that.
No.
I understand. I kind of want to get in there and watch it too. So that'll be a quick and easy download, and I'll digest that before we record our second episode. We can have a full knowledge of everything Red Dwarf.
Right. So for all these people who maybe just found this somewhere or came from a Doctor Who podcast and want to know what Red Dwarf is, maybe you could give everybody a little background.
Red Dwarf is a sitcom, first and foremost. It happens to be set on a spaceship millions of years in the future. But in my opinion, it's really just a show about two people who really love to get under each other's skin. And they might not like each other that much, but they really love pissing each other off. And that's really the foundation of the show, is the relationship between Rimmer and Lister, and the fact that they're kind of stuck together in this outrageous situation where this mining ship, which I'm not exactly sure, where does the mining ship go? Why are they light years away from Earth? And is Jupiter Mining Corporation really just a title, or is the Red Dwarf supposed to be mining Jupiter? I'm not sure. I don't know if that was ever explained. I guess we'll have to dig in and see what happens.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. But Rob Grant and Doug Naylor wrote this after writing a radio play, or a series of radio plays, called Dave Holland's Space Cadet, for a radio play on BBC Radio 4 called Son of Cliché. Chris Berry actually plays the computer Hab instead of the computer Holly or Hall or whatever. And that ran, there was one episode in one season and another 3 in another season. And it talks about Dave 3 trillion years from Earth, after the crew he was put in suspended animation, and the crew was devoured by a chameleonic monster, presumably the polymorph. And it's all about Dave coming back to Earth, I guess. I have not heard this. I would think that maybe some of the spin-off media from Red Dwarf might be an option for us to record an additional episode of TongueTied. We are going to talk about all 10 series of TongueTied, but there are 2 more months in this year that it'd be nice to possibly look at, maybe the USA pilots and the books and this particular Dave Holland's Space Cadet product.
I do have 2 of the books, and my son has read them. I haven't read them, but he says they are hilarious. And they're basically, I think one book is basically series 1, but all 6 stories are kind of jumbled up, and they've added stuff to it.
Now, both of your kids are teenagers, right?
Right. This is the oldest one. He's 19.
Do you share this Red Dwarf with them?
Yeah, they love it.
Okay, they both love it. So that's cool. It's nice to know that people who are that much younger than us can still track with this, that it's maybe possibly timeless comedy.
Yeah, my youngest is 17, and I was watching these yesterday, just doing a little marathon, and my youngest son walked in and sat down and just watched like 3 episodes with me and was just laughing his head off. He loved it.
That's great. Another little bit about the creation of the show that I need to talk to some of my British friends about. I actually talked to one of my British friends, and I'll get into this later, about the etymology of the term Gordon Bennett. So we'll talk about that later in the show. But I want to find out how and why BBC shows are created, because it seems to me that they kind of do it different than we do it here in the States as far as writing and piloting and all that kind of stuff. This time slot that they had for the first production block was actually supposed to be budgeted towards a series called Happy Families. And there was room for 6 studio blocks and that kind of stuff. And they decided to fit this in because Happy Families was not going to have a second series. So I'd be interested to talk to our friends across the pond to see if they can explain how the genesis of BBC shows are originated.
Yeah.
Let's hit it with episode 1.
Up first, the end.
Gordon Bennett. He's dead, Dave. Everybody is dead. Everybody is dead, Dave. Should have never let him out in the first place.
Which aired February 15th, 1988, written by Rob Grant and Doug Naylor, and produced and directed by Ed Bye. A mining ship from the Jupiter Mining Corporation called Red Dwarf. Well, here, I think Holly sums it up best.
This is an SOS distress call from the mining ship Red Dwarf. The crew are dead, killed by a radiation leak. The only survivors were Dave Lister, who was in suspended animation during the disaster, and his pregnant cat, who was safely sealed in the hold. Revived 3 million years later, Lister's only companions are a life form who evolved from his cat, and Arnold Rimmer, a hologram simulation of one of the dead crew.
So I'll tell you right off the bat that probably, like I said before, the main reason I love this show is the writing, more specifically the concepts. I mean, I just love where they go with, like, each episode is so different than the next. And secondly, for me, it's the cast. These guys are just so great. Craig Charles as Dave Lister, got Christopher Berry as Arnold J. Rimmer. The J stands for Judas. Danny John Jules as the cat, and Norman Lovett as Holly, the ship's computer. I think if it wasn't for their chemistry, this show would never have taken off. And it doesn't take long to warm up to these characters and care about them either, at least for me anyway. What do you think?
I think right from the first scene, you can tell the relationship I already described between Rimmer and Lister as far as getting under each other's skin. That Lister is misbehaving, and Rimmer's only, recourse to that is to write him up, put him on report. And everyone around him seems to think that that's a dumb thing except for Rimmer. Rimmer writing those reports is so important to him that it just kind of destroys their whole relationship, I think. But it's the foundation of their relationship at the same time. They just don't get along. But because they don't get along, they're the perfect couple, the perfect odd couple.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so right from the beginning there, this beginning episode has a lot of different stuff than we're going to see for the rest of the series, because there's actually other characters that these guys are interacting with, and it kind of shows that professionally they spend time together, but in their social lives they're doing other things.
This story in particular is the first one, so most of it is set up for the entire run of the show. We see how life was on the ship before the accident. And then we see Lister going into stasis, and in the blink of an eye, it's been 3 million years, but to Lister, it's only been a second. So we see how he copes with being the last human alive and living with the hologram of the guy he hated the most.
And before the accident, we get at least one scene of Lister hanging out with his crew, his friends hanging out there at the funeral, and just the fun interactions that they have going on there. I love to see Lister in his element with his guys. His drinking buddies, I guess, is really the best way to put it. We also see Rimmer struggling so hard to be something that he isn't. This is the foundation of his obsession with passing the engineering exam and becoming an officer. And you see him try so hard. He spends all this time writing the crib notes down on his arms. Don't you think he could just hide all of that information maybe in his brain by learning the information? No, folks, that's not how it works for Rimmer.
There's also another character here, the cat. Lister has a cat named Frankenstein that he keeps, and it gets sealed in the hold and protected, and it evolves over 3 million years. And the cat only shows up in the last 4 minutes of the episode. It's a 29-minute story, and he shows up at the 25-minute. Right at the end. But he's basically a humanoid version of a cat.
And I've found that the cat has very little in terms of being able to interact with the guys, but when he is given dialogue, he expands their world so much. Because in the few little lines that he has in here, we learn about cat mythology. We learn about what kind of person this cat is. The things that kind of bug me is, how did this cat survive alone? Presuming he is alone. We don't really get into this until another episode later in the season. But this cat is by himself in the hole and just kind of prowls around and does his own thing.
How am I looking? Looking nice. No, wait a minute. I'm looking better than nice. I'm looking dangerous. Ow! Dangerous! Ah! Hey, what's that? Oh, it's my shadow. Hey, even my shadow's looking nice. I'm looking nice. My shadow's looking nice. What a team! We are unbelievable. Okay, team, this way.
And, being over 3 million years, of course, he wasn't there 3 million years. He had ancestors and ancestors. And apparently, we'll get into this later with Waiting for God, but apparently, thousands of cats and big wars. And you think, well, how did that all happen in the hold of a ship? But whatever.
It's definitely a big ship. They definitely let us believe that this is a city in space.
Yeah.
Now, I want to go back in time to you watching these first episodes on VHS, Because the way I remember watching them on VHS, during the funeral scene, which I don't know, did you watch the DVDs or the Netflix at this point in rewatching these to record this episode?
I did the DVDs this time.
Okay. I watched on Netflix, and the song that's played at the funeral is completely different than what I remember, because I remember watching the VHSs and they did the "See you later, alligator, after a while, crocodile," which, it gets a laugh. But the song that was on Netflix was very different, and that just, kind of it explores in my mind the licensing practice that goes into distributing things in new ways.
I'll have to look that up. I guess I haven't seen that episode on Netflix, so now I'm curious as to what song it is, because on the DVD and on the original videotape, it's always been "See you later, alligator."
Okay, so you did. My memory is correct here. That was the way that it was in your memory as well. Okay. Anything to say about the other crew members before we move past the tragedy and get into the meat and potatoes of the rest of the season?
Well, it mostly focuses on the captain and also Lister's best friends, which are Chan and Peterson. Chan was actually I forget the actor's name, but you've probably heard me on my other show talk about EastEnders. He played a guy named Nigel on EastEnders for a long time. That was one of my favorites. So I'll mention this a little later, but it's funny how you watch something and then you go back years later and watch it again, and you're like, oh. You see people that now that you didn't know it the first time you watched it. That's one of those things. But yeah, it shows their interaction and how good friends they were, and it shows them playing around, and they put a quarter on Peterson's head, and they're like, okay, you have to hit the back of your head as many times as you can without this quarter falling off. And he's there like banging on the back of his head when they take the coin away. Right before he does it. That's pretty funny.
That's a funny bit, especially because we have seen Mark Williams so many other times in so many other characters. You recognize him?
I don't think so.
Okay. Isn't Olaf Peterson played by Mark Williams, who is in fact Ron Weasley's father?
That's right.
His father on our beloved Doctor Who.
Oh, yeah.
So here's him being a completely different and quite silly character as well.
That is so weird, because I saw him in Doctor Who and I was like, where have I seen that guy? I've seen him. And then I saw him pop up in Harry Potter as I was watching it with the kids, which was earlier. And
since I'm in the habit of blowing your mind right now, I might as well hit the other one too. I want to talk about Christine Kachanski, because Christine Kachanski is a rock star from the 80s. Her name is C.P. Grogan. I'm going to send you a clip, which I'm hoping you edit into the show at this point. But I've heard this clip on 1,000 radio stations every time they want to talk about birthdays.
Happy birthday, happy birthday. Happy birthday, happy birthday.
Okay.
And she does that little happy birthday. And I just looked that up in my research yesterday. And it's like, I've heard this song 1,000 times, and now I can hear her voice singing it. So that really blew my mind. So there's another little pop culture connection, which might only mean something to me, but there you go.
All right, so one thing that we're going to do for each story is we're going to tell you either what our favorite line was or our favorite scene, whichever, for each episode. So for this one, for me, there's a scene where Lister is going around eating bits of what looks like salt until Holly tells him it's the remains of the crew. So when he asks which one Kachanski is, he's like really crestfallen and sad and says,
"She was part of me plan. I never got round to telling her, but she was going to come with me to Fiji. She was going to wear a white dress and ride the horses, and I was going to take care of everything else. It was me plan. I planned it."
Well, she won't be much use to you on Fiji now. Not unless it snows and you need something to grit the path with.
That's my favorite. What was yours?
It's really hard to pick a favorite scene or line from this episode. So the one that always makes me laugh the most is Rimmer is insulting Lister and says, "Here I am stuck with a man that would lose a battle of wits with a stuffed iguana." And Lister says, "What's an iguana?" It's really pointless and stupid, but that's the one that makes me laugh the most in this particular episode.
Good times.
Next up, Future Echoes.
Holly, watch my lips. What is happening?
With the mirror and the cat and everything.
Oh, that. You're seeing future echoes. Didn't I explain this to you?
What are future echoes?
How simple do you want this?
So Lister can understand it.
Oh, dear.
It's difficult, I know.
Well, we're travelling faster than LS, right?
What's LS?
Light speed.
Smart arse.
Consequently, you're catching up with things you're about to do before you've actually done them.
Ah, so we're seeing bits of the future.
Yes.
See, I told you it was light speed. You should have asked me.
Which aired February 22nd, 1988, written by Rob Grant and Doug Naylor and directed by Ed By. Red Dwarf breaks the light barrier and starts to experience events from the future.
You could have guessed it. What do you think about this one?
And what you're talking about there is...
Wait, Paul, what was that?
I don't know.
Oh, well. Anyway. For a long time, this episode was my favorite from Series 1. That's changed now, but for a long time, I think the main reason was, again, the concept. I just thought it was a really cool idea, and also the drama that was built up near the end when Lister's headed for certain death. I mean, you really didn't know what was going to happen the first time you saw it, and there's absolutely no way you could have guessed it. What do you think about this one?
And what you're talking about there is it's not all over. Like, that storyline does get explained later as we continue. So we'll try to swing back around in Series 2 or in Episode 2 and 3 to explain what actually happens in Future Echoes here. So that's kind of cool. What was the question? What do I think? I think that Future Echoes definitely has the great high concept sci-fi stuff. We get a little bit further away from the sitcom kind of format, and yes, they are in space, and weird spacey things are happening. There's the bit about the zero-G football, and these zero-G football people are dressed in American football clothes. So I'm wondering, is zero-G football more like soccer or more like football? And it's hard to say. And my favorite scene, actually there's two, so I don't know if, I guess I'll just give you both of them. The scene where Rimmer comes in as a future echo and is explaining to Lister that he's going to remain on while Lister goes into stasis, but he's not interacting with Rimmer or with Lister in any way. And then he walks out of the room and immediately walks back in the room, and the same scene happens over again with a different reaction from Lister.
Yeah, see, I knew this was going to happen. We would eventually pick the same thing, because that was mine too. When Lister and Rimmer are having, it's like a perfectly timed conversation twice in a row, which was just genius. That's just genius writing there.
Absolutely. So I'll give you my other one too, so we can have a little bit of variety. I love the final future, well, not the final one, but the second to last future echo of old man Lister in bed with his robotic arm, which just happens to have a bottle cap opener on it. And Rimmer keeps asking him, "What about me, old man? What about me?" And it's, "Rimmer, come closer, come closer." Ah! And he just, completely has Rimmer over the edge there, thinking that he might learn something about his future self, but really doesn't. It's just another way of Lister getting under Rimmer's skin.
That's another thing I love about the show. I mean, of course, it's a comedy, and it's actually really funny, but I've seen it so many times, and there are just scenes where I still laugh out loud. That's one of them. But it also provides a bit of drama here and there and makes a more well-rounded and realistic show. Realistic as in, character relationships, not scenarios. You know what I mean? But like I said, in this one, it was Lister walking back to the drive room, and the music it plays and the camera angles and the look on his face. It was all really dramatic, which the first time I saw it, I didn't really expect that in a sitcom.
It was very dramatic, and then it's all broken up by the cat being silly.
Yeah.
Which, let's talk a little bit more about the cat's characterization, especially here in Series 1, because the cat is just loaded with vanity, like you would think any cat is. Mm-hmm. And he's really kind of funny in this one because he's obsessed with eating those fish. He doesn't know that they're robotic fish.
Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna eat you little fishies. I'm gonna eat you little fishy. Yeah, yeah.
And it's just really kind of funny. He doesn't get a lot of meat and potatoes in his dialogue a lot of the time, but he just gets to be a silly, like overconfident, self-absorbed cat.
The toaster annoys the crap out of me.
I think it's supposed to annoy everyone.
It is supposed to, but it does a great job because I hate it.
Is this the one where it sings? Or they all like kind of blend together after watching a whole series like so quickly.
It's either this one or the one after.
Yeah, so F you, toaster. You're annoying. You get chucked out an airlock. I don't want any toast, all right?
Did someone say they wanted toast?
Another thing that I love about this show is the end credits, because they're not always the same every time. In this one, the end credits are the Polaroid shot that develops as the credits roll with Lister and Jim and Bexley. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, Waiting for God has a different end sequence also. Of course, the thing that always catches me a lot about these kind of shows is music, and that theme song for the end credits was definitely one of the things that solidified my fandom as a Red Dwarf fan. That silly goldfish shoals nibbling at my toes kind of stuff. And we will have to play one of these days. There are like 4 verses that are all just as absurd, and it's awesome.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely one that gets stuck in your head for days and days. All right, up next, Balance of Power.
Whoa, can't stand still.
Lister, what on Titan is this din? Lister! What on Titan is this din?
Asking Billy Stank.
Is this it? It's got a health warning on it, you know. It's bad for you.
Classic.
Danger, government health warning. This music can make you irritable and irrational and has been linked with disorders of the nervous system and bowels.
Remember, no one takes any notice of that stuff.
Which aired February 29th, 1988. A leap year. Again, written by Rob Grant and Doug Naylor, and directed by Ed By. Lister attempts to pass the chef's exam just so he can rank one notch above Rimmer. Tell me what you think about this one, Paul.
They're definitely like at full-fledged like battle mode here, because Dave wants his cigarettes. So, he's obeying Rimmer, which for a hologram that can't touch anything, he sure does a good job of manipulating Lister by hiding his stuff, hiding all of the holographic discs and all that kind of stuff. Like he must have those scutters doing a lot of work for him when we're not seeing what's happening on screen. Yeah. For someone that is comprised all of light and not hard light at this time, but just light, he does a lot to manipulate his, bunkmate. And I'm pretty impressed by that. But one of the other things about this one is it has the disco scene. It's a flashback to before the accident. And Dave's, Saturday night wants to have a drink and a cigarette and kind of reminisce about it. But it's just so sad. It's so sad to have him reminisce about the good times with his friends that are all over. And I don't know. That's just one of the things that strikes me about Series 1 in total is that Lister's really pining for the past. There's things that he regrets about his life and still regrets it 3 million years later.
Like we said in the last one, it's a little bit of a dramatic scene that they throw in from time to time. And he's sitting there having a laugh and having fun with all his buddies, and then all of a sudden they just disappear, and he's like, I'm alone, And they play the little music.
It has the scene with Rimmer coming up, and he's on the learning drugs, and all he does is memorize that same conversation. And then, of course, they swing around and have Lister taking the learning drugs in the future. And where did you get them from? Of course, he got them from Rimmer's locker. Yeah. So, Rimmer tries to admonish Lister for doing something wrong, but he did it wrong because he had access because of Rimmer's stuff. So it's just like this moral triangle, if you even want to call it a triangle, more of just a circle.
Yeah, like you were saying, the insults run wild in this show, which That's another thing about the series that makes me laugh.
Best-
there are a lot in this episode, like Rimmer calling Lister a rectum-faced pygmy.
So there's another thing, is that Rimmer can change his appearance at will, which don't we all wish we could do that at some point? And here this hologram can look and act or look and sound like anyone on file.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a pretty neat high concept sci-fi thing. Also, I don't know if there were any hologram characters before Arnold J. Rimmer. I know that we all fell in love with the holographic Doctor from Star Trek Voyager, and that was another non-human character that was able to show us a mirror of humanity in a Star Trek series. This one, he just happens to be a hologram because of the circumstances of the accident. But I don't know if there were holographic characters before that. That might be something for us to research and or our listeners to write in about.
Yeah, why don't you tell everybody how they can write in and send us some feedback?
I'd like everybody to go first to the Facebook page at facebook.com/tonguetied podcast, or you can write us at tonguetiedpodcast@yahoo.com.
Cool, and we'll repeat those again at the end of the show.
Favorite line or scene?
Favorite line of this one is the cat. After he has all that fish and he goes, "Oh, I've been fished to death." That's my favorite. Laying on the bed with a big old belly.
It's fun to see that interaction. That's one of the clips that I'm going to want you to pull is the cat finds all the cigarettes and, "See this hand? It is mine. See these things? They are mine." Just like you'd think a cat would be. You know, the cat is the dominant life form in our society right now. And it just... It gets us to feed it and give it a place to sleep, and we pet it when it looks cute, and it's just how you'd think a cat would behave if it were a person that could talk back.
How am I looking? I'm looking nice. My hair is nice, my face is nice, my suit is nice. I'm looking really nice. Ow! Jump back! Hey! I wonder how I'm looking now. Still looking nice. My hair is still nice. My face is still nice. My suit, I'm just nice, period.
So my favorite scene is actually with the Scudders. They're watching a film in the movie theater, and Rimmer comes along and says, "Hey, you guys don't have time off. What's the deal?" And they show him the broom and dustpan, like, "Yeah, we had this planned. We knew he was going to come to us, so we're going to have this excuse." And then he walks away, and they give the British middle finger, which is the two-fingered salute.
Yeah.
And I think that's great that this little robotic hand thing is able to do a gesture, especially an insulting gesture. I don't know if they planned the Scudders just to do that, but who knows? It was fun. That was my favorite. So what else do we have to say about this particular episode?
I read that this, of all 6 episodes this season, that this was the one that was the least favorite of fans. I'm not quite sure why. It's not my least favorite.
I'm definitely a fan of this one. It really is, after 2 episodes of Rimmer and Lister kind of sparring, it becomes a full-blown war, and it's cool to see Dave do something about it instead of just being lazy, and to do something within the realm of possibility too. He's not going to pass the engineering exam, but he can probably learn how to cook. That's not too hard, right? Next up, Waiting for God.
It's a smegging garbage pot!
Which aired March 7th, 1988, written by Rob Grant and Doug Naylor, and directed by Ed Bye. When the cat shares his religious upbringing, Lister realizes he's really the god of the cat people, with a laundry list. This one opens with another great sci-fi concept, which is that the cats don't write. They have books that you smell instead of reading. And that's pretty cool to think that someone can express ideas through smells rather than, words or other things. Yes, they do have picture books too, but I thought that was pretty cool. And the whole idea of a drop in a bucket, the waves can circle out through time and have such greater consequences. And that's really digging into the cat mythology here. I
have to say, of all the first season episodes, this is probably the weakest for me. It's not really a bad one. It's just compared to the other 5, this is probably the weakest. Like you said, it's an interesting concept, but I don't know. I just thought it might have felt like a little flat. The only funny aspect of it was the subplot with Rimmer finding a pod that he thinks contains aliens, but in fact, it's Quagars. Double A, actually. But in fact, it's just a garbage pod.
Yeah, there's a couple quotes here, too, because everybody else knows that it's a garbage pod, even Holly, but they just keep egging Rimmer on just because it's a good laugh.
But yeah, it's basically a story about the cat, about his background and where his people came from and how they all thought Lister was God. And it's interesting watching that scene where he explains all the mythology to Lister, and Lister comes back with, hey, that was my laundry list, or hey, that was because I left so-and-so in the basket, and different things like that. I thought it was really interesting.
And even the cat people think that the cat is a moron. He's not one of the smart cats.
What was your favorite scene or line in here?
I guess reading through the picture book with Cloister the Stupid, Frozen in Time, and then, digging really into the cat mythology of the sausage and donut stand on Fushal, and the holy wars between the people that wanted the red hats versus the blue hats, and just the fact that Dave's like, well, they were supposed to be green, that kind of stuff. So all of that kind of stuff wrapped together, which we've had a few little tidbits in the first 3 episodes of what this might be, and then it's kind of flushed out. But then after this, we really don't hear any more cat mythology. This sets up the cat as a main character, and then we move forward with him for 9 more series with the cat as more of a main character at this point.
Mm-hmm. I have a favorite scene and a favorite line. I'll tell you, my favorite scene was Lister is sleeping, and Rimmer tries to wake him up.
Lister, are you awake? Lister? Lister?
Lister!
Are you awake?
Yeah.
That was my favorite. But the best line, you were talking about the books. So Lister is reading a smell book from the cat, and Rimmer says that he should smell one of his own shirts. It's probably a novel from Victor Hugo. That was my favorite.
Yeah, that's a good one for sure.
There's a guest star in here. We have Noel Coleman, who plays another cat that's been hidden away for a while in the bowels of the ship. And he's old and blind. And he played General Smythe in Doctor Who in the War Games.
Oh, yeah, he did. Wow.
Yeah,
absolutely. I can see that completely. That's a really funny delivery, because he's all crestfallen because he's lost his faith after these holy wars and everything. And then this guy shows up and says that he's Cloister the Stupid, and he has this religious revelation and then promptly dies.
And if you watch, they were called Smeg Ups and Smeg Outs and different little videotapes you could buy, which I think they've included on the DVDs now. But it's bloopers and deleted scenes and things like that from the show. And this guy had a really, really hard time getting his lines right. I don't know if you've seen that.
I haven't seen it yet, but that's definitely something to go dig up. So yeah, I'll be looking for Smeg Ups from season 1.
Up next, Confidence and Paranoia.
And this is mine, that's mine, all this is mine. I'm claiming all of this as mine. Except that bit. I don't want that bit. But all the rest of this is mine. Hey, this has been a good day. I've eaten 5 times, I've slept 6 times, and I've made a lot of things mine. Tomorrow, I'm going to see if I can have sex with something.
Which aired March 14th, 1988, written by Rob Grant and Doug Naylor, and directed by Ed Bye. Lister contracts pneumonia, but a form that's mutated over 3 million years and creates solid figures of his imagination, including his confidence and his paranoia. So I was saying earlier about watching a movie or a TV show once or twice, and then you don't see it for a long time, and then you watch it again and recognize people that weren't famous at the time, but now you know who they are. So for anybody who's just getting into this show, or or fans who haven't seen this one in a while, go back and watch it, because late night talk show host Craig Ferguson is in here playing confidence.
Yeah, this totally blew my mind this morning because I went and read that and it's like, wait, is it really the same Craig Ferguson? Because he puts on like this American Italian accent.
Ding dong, another great idea from the people who brought you beer milkshakes.
Which is over the top, like not what we were expecting to hear from Craig Ferguson. I looked at his career. I really think this is like one of his first appearances on television. It goes that far back into his past. So that was definitely one of those mind-blowing events here. Now, here's another one of those high-concept sci-fi things where hallucinations become real and they can interact with the world around you. And I was kind of, into that. That's kind of neat, especially Lister's dreaming about fish falling from the sky, and then their quarters are filled with fish. All because, Rimmer put the idea in his head before by saying that it's a very improbable thing to happen. I wonder what would be more difficult. Do you get real fish or do you get prop fish? I think that real fish might actually be cheaper to use in filming this sort of thing than prop fish. But who knows? That's just a kind of weird thing I was thinking about when I watched this episode.
Yeah, I was really thinking about the behind the scenes when they did that scene, and I would assume they were real fish. They look like real fish.
The ones that are living are obviously real fish, but who would want to? There's hundreds of fish in this scene, and they're dumping them all over the place, all over sleeping Lister in bed, and they're hitting Rimmer in the face with them and everything like that. And then all the fish mysteriously disappear. Where's it on?
The cat. But yeah, that's the first thing I thought of when I saw that scene again. I was like, wow, the cleanup they must have had in that studio that day must have sucked. My favorite scene in this one, Rimmer is talking to Paranoia, and he tries to get the servo robot to stab him.
Have you met Stab Him?
If you hate him, why do you talk about him so much?
Because he makes my life one big, humiliating, cringe-making, guilt-ridden hell.
No! Stab him! Stab him! Stab him! Quick! Stab him! You haven't met Stab him. He's one of our scutters.
That's my
I'm
favorite.
a big fan of that one, too. Mine's the cat. The cat is spraying his scent all around the spaceship, and he's doing a little dance and singing a little song, and he says something along the lines of, I slept 5 times and I ate 6 times, and now I've made a lot of things mine, and maybe tomorrow I can have sex with something. And then he's dancing around and going,
Oh, yeah! X, I really want it. Ow! X, I'm gonna get it. Yeah!
and then he sees Lister passed out on the floor and says,
S-E-X, I think I found it. Oh, it's you! Hey, monkey, you're sick.
that gets the studio audience in an uproar, and it's really funny.
And at the end, there's a whole thing about Lister attempting to switch Rimmer's hologrammatic disc with Kachansky's, but he doesn't know that Rimmer's already moved the disc and replaced it with a copy of his own. So there's something that I noticed, and I want to see how you feel about it. In a scene that's almost a bit out of character at this time for Rimmer, he actually tells Lister that maybe he shouldn't bring back Kachansky because it would cause him a bit of, heartache or misery or whatever. And I think that shows that Rimmer secretly does care about Lister at least a little bit. What do you think?
I thought that he was saying don't do this because he knew that he had already switched the disc and he was going to create a duplicate that would be twice as much annoyance for Lister than just the heartache. So I kind of interpreted that scene a little bit differently. But, there are a few human parts of their relationship. I remember in the end, Lister's in bed and Rimmer's off to take the test. And even though they jab at each other constantly, Lister does say to Rimmer, seriously, good luck. I hope that you do well on this. So there is a little bit of that humanity between them. And even if we go forward into that Marooned, the two of them really do have a heart-to-heart in that episode where it shows that they do really care about each other, even though they're constantly sparring.
Yeah, and that the scene I was talking about, I just assumed that Rimmer switched it after that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but who knows? Because they didn't show it, so you don't know when he switched it. So I guess it could go either way.
And this is another episode that actually you go from the end of this episode to the beginning of the next one. There's actually an overlying arc that happens here and a little bit of continuity, because the whole next episode is all about the duplicates of Rimmer. And that scene leads us into our final story of Series 1, Me Squared.
Ippy dippy, my spaceshipy, on a course so true. Past Neptune and Pluto's moon, the one I choose is you.
Excellent, excellent decision, Listy. Turn him off. And the one you end on is the one who stays, yeah?
It's you, Rimmer.
Wait a minute. Just hold your horses. Hang on.
It's your own fault, Rimmer. If you'd have given me Kachansky's hologram, none of this would have happened. You made the bed, you lie in it, drive room, 10 minutes.
Drive room, 5 minutes. I don't believe it. I'll be ippy-dippy today.
Which aired March 21st, 1988, written by Rob Grant and Doug Naylor, directed by Ed Bye. Much to Lister's horror, there are 2 Rimmers on board, and it's a match made in heaven. Until it's not.
Bastard!
There's a lot of yelling in this episode, and you can see how Chris Barry, when he gets mean, he gets really mean. And the one person that he can be the most mean to, we have not seen him be this mean to Lister, but the things that he has to say to himself are just terrifying sometimes.
This episode is my absolute favorite of the entire Series 1. If I ever need something to take my mind off things, this is one of the episodes I put on to make me laugh. It's a classic. There's some of the funniest insults in this one, including, this is my favorite. It's one of my favorite lines of all time in Red Dwarf.
Stop your foul whining, you filthy piece of distended rectum!
That's my favorite. And yeah, Chris Berry does an excellent job in this, playing against himself. He's really a talented guy. I mean, later on in the series, you'll see him do impersonations of other crew members, and he's spot on like every time. And in this series, if you listen closely, he's the voice of quite a few of the things on the ship, most notably the food dispenser.
I hadn't noticed that. I like to go back and listen, but that's cool, yeah.
And I've never seen Citizen Kane. In fact, I was thinking about watching that today. I know it's considered the greatest movie of all time, so I'm a little embarrassed that I've never watched it.
I haven't seen it either, so don't worry, you know.
Is
he in that?
No, but this story references that movie
right.
quite a lot.
I just got to say that if there was another me, if there was another Paul Towsley walking around out there, I would hate his guts. I would not want to have to deal with his nonsense, you know, so I can totally appreciate where this story came from.
Oh, man, I felt bad for Lister having to deal with 2 Rimmers in this one. That's just horrific.
At the same time, though, it got rid of Rimmer. You know, these guys have this city-sized spaceship flying around in space, yet they're still bunkmates. You know, wouldn't you think that if they really didn't like each other and they didn't want to be around each other, that someone would pick a cabin on, you know, whatever, deck 27 and another one on deck 2 so that they're nowhere near each other and they don't have to interact at all. But in this one, Rimmer moves out so he can live with Rimmer, and Dick's got the place to himself. And I don't really think that Dave takes full advantage of that. He does throw all the laundry on the floor, but then realizes that, no, the laundry really belonged back in the basket. It smells horrible.
Yeah, that was we were watching that last night. That was my son's favorite scene. He does the handstand, and he's, oh, smeg in hell, and puts it back. But yeah, I was just sitting here thinking while you were talking that both of these Rimmers, one is the real one is a copy, and you almost think if you go real philosophical about it, that the copy is what Rimmer thinks that he should be. And then the original is who Rimmer actually is. And now, especially since he's gotten to know Lister a lot more, you realize as it goes on that, and I think that's what Lister realized, that the other one was like super hardcore 100% jerk. And there was no redeeming qualities whatsoever. and that's why he's the one that got erased.
It's cool to see their interaction, too, because they kind of have a little pact to drive each other to be more motivated, which I assume that play is going on inside Rimmer's head the whole time, that, you know, there's probably one voice in his head that's trying to drive him forward, and then there's another voice that's being more realistic and, you know, maybe I shouldn't work this hard, or maybe there's something standing in my way to work this hard. and here the voice is real, and that one of them takes the role of pushing and the other one takes the role of kind of digging his heels in and not getting things done.
Yeah, and I think putting these two up against each other, it kind of shows the audience both sides of Rimmer, and maybe makes you feel a little more sympathetic towards his character for the first time.
It really helps to flesh his character out a lot. We did get a good flavor of his character during the whole first season, but even coming up to the final moments there, which I don't know, what's your favorite scene, so that we can talk about that, because I know what mine is.
I guess my favorite scene was the end when Rimmer is telling the whole gazpacho soup story.
Yep, that's what I was going to give you for this one, was the Rimmer comes in full Admiral's outfit, thinking that he's going to get shut off and that the other Rimmer is going to be the official Rimmer hologram. And he really lets loose his whole, everything about his character, everything about his life, all of these things that he wanted to keep bottled up and secret, but he thinks he's going to die, so he might as well tell everyone. And he gets done with this big confessional, and that's when Lister tells him that, oh, no, we already turned the other one off. You're the one that gets to stay. So that was my favorite scene of that whole story.
Yeah, I love that. And, oh, please, you're not going to use this against me. You're not going to make fun of me. No, I'd never do that. Oh, great. Let's go do something. Super.
Excellent writing. Awesome. Right down to the last line. Excellent writing.
Definitely.
We are definitely both in love with the writing of this show, and we'll just keep that in mind as we continue forward with our analysis of the Red Dwarf series.
All right, so that's it for series 1 of Red Dwarf. I must say, for a brand new show, they really found their feet almost from the get-go. To me, there was only one episode that wasn't quite up to par, but out of 5, that's a pretty good statement.
Yeah, and maybe that shows that they were working on it a bit more before it actually hit production, that they'd had, mulled this over for years in their heads and had a chance to, flush out some of the ideas as a radio play first. You know how it works. I don't know if you've noticed this with rock bands, but when a big rock band has their debut album, they've spent their whole careers working on that one album. And it's really a super duper big, great album, and then they become super famous, and everyone expects them to turn another one around in the next year when they've already been, working on this material for 15 years before that or whatever, and really spent the time to perfect what that first album was. And there's a bunch of bands that are super popular that never make it through that next step, that never really are able to compose and create something that they'd already spent all those years working on. So that's kind of how I look at this series, is that they spent a lot of time making this as awesome as it is, and were able to perfect it in such a way, because of the great lines. And I'm sure they had been creating this mythology and the language and the background and all of that kind of stuff over the years that they spent developing this product.
Basically, the term that we use is the sophomore slump that you're talking about.
Absolutely.
And I really don't think that this show ever had that, because to me, all the series are great.
And this might be another one of those things that's different about BBC shows, but here in America, we are used to 24 episodes per season, and they have 6. So maybe it's easier to write 6 episodes and make them really outstanding, rather than, the demanding production schedule of American television.
In fact, now in America, this is a bit of a side tangent here, but in America now, some of the shows are actually doing basically half seasons, like The Following and other shows that are starting to come out now. They'll do instead of 24 episodes, they'll do 12. And later on this year, they're doing another series of 24, and it's only going to be 12 episodes. So I think it works better when it's shorter like that. It keeps your attention span, and
there's no room for filler, that you have to use every scene, every frame to make it work.
Exactly. And shows like Luther and everything, they're only 4 or 6 episodes, and they work really well because each scene is really crafted and not filler.
So I teased earlier I wanted to talk about the term Gordon Bennett. I actually think that I'm going to put that off for a future episode, because I want to go sit down and speak to one of my British friends and see if they can't tell us, A, how BBC shows are produced and why they have such a limited run, And then B, I want to try to see if I can get a little bit more in-depth discussion of the term Gordon Bennett, which I just think is funny. You know, like, why would you use someone's name as a curse word?
I've heard it here, and I've heard it in Doctor Who, because Ace said it a few times.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, of the characters, what part of their personalities do you see in yourself?
I guess there's a little of me in all of these, but I would have to say probably Lister is more like me than the other three. But you know, I work hard during the week. I'm Rimmer during the week. I'm Mr. You know, try to get things done at work and do all this. And then when I get home, I turn into Lister, and I don't want to do anything for a while, and my wife hates it. And so, you know, I strap my boots up and do a little housework, you know, every other day or whatever is necessary. And, but yeah. What about you?
Put on your curry-stained shirt and sit down in the basement or wherever it is you watch TV and sit on the couch and just enjoy a nice cold one and sit back and enjoy. And if you really need to do some work, someone will come along and tell you, right?
That's exactly right.
I would have to go with that with you also. In my relationship with my roommates, I want to say that I'm definitely a lot more Rimmer. You know, I would even go so far as to say I'm a little bit more Sheldon, like Sheldon from Big Bang Theory, as far as the anal OCD kind of, like, I like my things the way that I like them, and that if you want to disagree, you can disagree, but it's still going to be my way. And I'd like to try to think that I work hard and work towards things, but a lot of times I feel like I'm a wannabe about stuff, even a wannabe fan or a wannabe podcaster, that I could be working a lot harder to make these things a success. And there's a lot of stuff going on there, but I just don't seem to grasp it. And that's where the changeover from Rimmer to Lister kind of goes, because Lister's a dreamer. Lister's got his plan, and even though the plan is completely unrealistic 3 million years in the future, he's still got the plan. He's still going to somehow get back to Fiji and have a cat and a horse and 2 sheep and breed horses, and he's got his plan. And just because it's his plan and it's the thing that he wants, he's not going to let anyone stand in his way, except for maybe his own motivation.
Lister, you are a nothing.
I'm not a nothing. I've got me plan.
What's that, the plan to be the slobbiest entity in the entire universe?
No. My 5-year plan. You see, I'm going to do 2 more trips, and I've been saving up all my pay.
Since when?
Since always. That's why I never buy any soap or deodorants or socks or anything like that, you know. Anyway, I'm going to buy myself a little farm on Fiji. I'm going to get a sheep and a cow and breed horses.
With a sheep and a cow?
No, with horses and horses.
On Fiji?
Yeah, the prices there are unbelievable.
Yes, because they had a volcanic eruption and now most of Fiji's 3 feet below sea level.
It's only 3 feet they can wade. That's why the animals are going to have to be quite tall.
Nice plan, Lister. Excellent plan. Brilliant plan, Lister. What about the sheep? What are you going to do, buy them water wings? Fit them with stilts? Better still, you could crossbreed them with dolphins and have leaping mutton.
There's one thing that we forgot to talk about.
What's that?
Holly.
Oh, how can we forget Holly? Holly's amazing.
So Norman Lovett as Holly. I think he started out as a stand-up comedian, and then they brought him in on the show. But
well, right from the beginning, we learned that Holly is kind of he's super AI. Number one, he's artificial intelligence to the next degree. He has personal relationships with the crew before they die, because he calls them all by their first name. He is the go-to guy on Red Dwarf. When you want something done, you ask Holly, and he does it. And that's really kind of cool. It's like Siri, but so much further in the future. And it's almost prophetic, too, because we've got technology that does this now. But in that case, it's a person personifying this technology. And it's so much so that we forget that he's a computer. I really think of Holly as a person and not as a computer. And he's a bit off. He's hung around for 3 million years by himself, waiting for the radiation to subside so that he could let Lister out of stasis. And I think he's gone a bit queer in the time being, you know? And really comes across in this and in future shows.
Emergency. There's an emergency going on.
And as I was saying earlier about the credits and how interesting it is that they're different a lot each time. One of the things I used to love when I first started watching this show was seeing which, what joke Holly was going to tell in the opening credits, because it's different each time.
I'm a big fan of those too. I would like to have seen those continue, but at the same time, change is the spice of life. So we get a little bit different stuff happening each season as far as the opening credits are concerned.
I think my favorite of the whole first series is when he asks Lister, he says, "Hey, look, would you do me a favor and erase some of the books in my memory? Just because I've read everything there is to read over 3 million years and I'm a bit bored." And he's like, "Well, okay, what do you want me to do?" He's like, "Well, get rid of all the Agatha Christie novels." He's like, "All right, type this in," types everything in. He's like, "There, I've done it." He's like, "Done what?" He's like, "I erased all the novels from Agatha Christie." He's like, "Who's that?"
Yeah, he's both a great comedian and a great straight man at the same time. So he's able to fill both of those roles in it. And, he's kind of an annoying, constant companion, too, because Holly is the all-seeing eye. He's the one that knows what's going on the whole ship, and there's no privacy because Holly can see everything. And I have to say that Norman's my favorite Holly. Holly does go through a sex change in the future and becomes a woman, but then he also switches back later in the series, and we get Norman back. So I have to say that he's definitely my favorite portrayal of this character, and we can continue on with him for Series 2 and then pick him up again later as the show progresses.
Yeah, I agree. He was my favorite, too. I liked the female Holly, but we'll get to that several months from now.
And like all true cult shows, this show has a language all of its own and a background all of its own. So we really believe, after seeing especially these first 6 episodes, we believe in the world that's there.
Yeah, and all the names and the curse words like Smeghead. Coming up next month, Series 2, where the crew travels to different planets. They go on the pole, and they meet a neurotic little robot named Crichton. Please give us some feedback on our Facebook page. It's www.facebook.com/TongueTied Podcast, and you can also email us at TongueTiedPodcast@yahoo.com.
Please do send in some criticism and or feedback. Let us know what you think. Let us know what we should be talking about on these episodes also. We've got a pretty clear format of what we want to do, but there's always room to chit-chat.
All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
Be seeing you. Thank you for listening to TongueTied, a Red Dwarf podcast. Red Dwarf, the song TongueTied, and all associated material are trademarks of Grant Naylor Productions. No infringement is intended. You can email the podcast at tonguetiedpodcast@yahoo.com. Like us on Facebook at facebook.com/tonguetiedpodcast. And follow us on Twitter at tonguetiedpod. For the boys from the Dwarf, this is Paul Towsley saying,
Gadabble, diggle, doggle, niggle, foggle, nibble, nay. I'm trying to say I'm tongue-tied, tongue-tied, whenever you are near me. I'm mummy, 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 whenever you're...
There are 169 people on board this ship. You, Rimmer, are over 1 man. Why can't you two get on?
You see, I try, sir. I'm not an insubordinate man by nature. I try and respect Rimmer and everything, but it's not easy because he's such a smeghead.
Did you hear that, sir? Lister, do you have any conception of the penalty for describing a superior technician as a smeghead?
Oh, Rimmer. You are a smeghead.
Hey, that was good. You should have finished on a song. It would have been perfect.